As you know, we have to start with our fantastic sponsors. We are very thankful that they make this event possible, all of them. Welcome. My name is Tamás Hajas. I'm a front-end Drupal developer from Hungary. I work for Mirum Budapest. Let me introduce you Mirum. Mirum is a global agency. We specialize in designing and building digital experiences and products in 20 countries with more than 46 offices and more than 2,500 professionals and more than 400 developers, engineers, using not just Drupal, but a whole lot of other technologies. Our topic, as I mentioned, variable fonts in the real world. Okay, but first, what are variable fonts? I think you all know that the font can have a lot of different variations. For example, it can be lightweight, just like this, or bold. It can be condensed, it can be narrow or wide, and so it can be italic or normal, and so on. And all those variations are stored in different static font files. So a lightweight variation is a file, the bold variation is a file, a narrow variation is a file, and so on. But in variable fonts, all these variations are stored in just one file. So a variable font is one font file that can behave like multiple fonts. You can store multiple font styles and in a relatively small size. And that small size comes from the fact that each character has only one outline. And the points that construct the character's outline have instructions that how they should behave or move to create, for example, another weight. So just morph, and we have another weight, like this. That's it. Why it is interesting for us. Why should we care? And before I talking about this to you, in general, I want to tell you that it is important because typography is part of our communication and it can strengthen or weaken our message. So it's really important. So let's see the advantages first. Here's a site. This is the site of Mirum Opus, which is an event. This is a conference held in London and San Diego in every year. It's not a developer conference, but it's technical oriented. So, to make this message understandable, this year's conference designer used a monospace font. This way, he used Roboto, which means he has to use Roboto, Roboto Mono, Medium, Mono Bold, 4 files, more than 500 kilobytes. But he would have used Noboto Flex, which is a variable font, only one file, and less than 200 kilobytes. So our first advantage with variable fonts, less data to download, less files and smaller files. Let's go on. What do you see? What is the difference of the two screens, of the two browsers? Okay, I know that the browsers are wider and narrower, but what is the other difference? Something like that. Not the font weight, but the fonts itself are narrower on the narrower screen and wider on the wider screen. So it can make a better fit on the screens. This is our second advantage, a more responsive text, a more adaptable text. And we have more. This is a site created by Microsoft to demonstrate the possibilities of variable fonts. Just look at this small screencast. When I scroll, all the headlines have an animation. And this is not an SVG, these are variable fonts. Also, I have this horse. This horse is a letter in a variable font file. And this is also animatable. The HTML and the CSS for this animation is less than 400 bytes. And the font is less than 4 kilobytes. So really, really small. So advantage 3, variable fonts are animatable. Every aspect of variable fonts. Next thing, this is a strange one. So, in the time of printing, every font and every detail of a font was optimized to the font size. So, when we had a bigger font, larger font, it was much more detailed, just like this one here. And when we had a smaller font, it was less detailed, but more readable, a small size. So what you can see here, they have all the same size, but showing the differences if they were the same. And when fonts came to the web, we lost these details. When you use a static font file, a digital font, it will be the same in every size. It doesn't matter it is 16 px or 72 px. It will be exactly the same, except its size. With variable fonts, optical sizing, this is the terminus we are talking about. So optical sizing is back. So a variable font can be much more detailed when it is displayed in large size, and less detailed when it is displayed in small size. Less detailed but more readable. So advantage 4, optical size is back. Advantage 5, there's no illustration, granular control. Variable fonts provide much more granular control. It means, for example, we all know we can set the font weight with classic fonts with 100, 200, 600, and so on. When you use a variable font, you can set its weight to, for example, 532. And it works, and it will be different than 533. And all these things are technical things. But what this means, these technical things can lead to a more typographic richness on the web. We can have much more interesting pages, much nicer pages, much more user-friendly pages, just like this. This page uses just one font, but looks really good. It looks like a printed book, but it's a web page. It's a CodePen example, just like this. It's another example of a variable font. It uses 18 variations from one font. Or just look at this card. It's also from the Microsoft demo. This is not a picture or something like this. These are real typography, real text, formatted with CSS. That's all. So, now we know the advantages. Of course, there can be disadvantages as well, or problems. So, what are some potential pitfalls to look out for? What kind of problems may we have with variable fonts? First, variable fonts can provide, and usually provide, a lot of options. And it is much harder to choose when we have a lot of options. There can be too many options. Also, when there are a lot of options, it's much easier to mess up. And it's much easier to have inconsistencies in the design. So, more typographic knowledge is needed from the designer and from the front-end developer as well. And also, when you have a very, very simple design with only one font, no variations, and then a variable font may be not the best fit because it may be larger than the one static font what we want to use because it's hold everything in one font file. So in this case, performance gain is not guaranteed. So there won't be performance gain. Also, different fonts have different options and work differently in browsers, which means you have to know what you choose and you have to test it extensively because features and results can be very different. We are at the early stages of using variable fonts. Okay. Also, licensing and price can be interesting, can be different things. There can be subscriptions or there can be a more expensive, you have to pay more for one file because it holds everything what was in different files, which was possible to buy separately. So that's it. And also, there can be other things, and there will be one thing I will be talk about a little bit later, but not yet. So, advantages, possible problems, but the topic of this session is how to use variable fonts in the real world. So how to use them. The first step to use them is to have variable fonts. Where to find variable fonts? Just a quick list. There are some sites which list variable fonts. Also, another one, it's just a Google spreadsheet. Also, there are news about variable fonts. Also, there is accesspraxis.org, the animated horse from accesspraxis site. And also there's wcamfondu.com, which is not a listing, but helps you to know the features of your variable fonts. So these are all useful. So when you have your variable fonts, you find a good font, you want to use them. How to use variable fonts on the web now. And I want to emphasize that now, because this is a new technology and this is changing. And there will be changes in the future. So it is important. What I'm showing you is now, and it means you can use them now, but it will change how we use it in the future. Integrating variable fonts is pretty straightforward and nothing unusual if you are familiar with font face. It is the good old font face we have to use. We have a font face declaration with the Amstelvor Alpha definition, which is a variable font itself. And there is only one thing, that you have to choose the format to both two variations. If we use the TTF font, it should be TTF variations, and so on. Always following the font type, and adding the variation keyword to this. That's all we have to do. And this way, we can include our variable font. Really. Wait. I think all of you thinking about, okay, can I use it? Do you think about it? Yeah. I have good news. Yes, you can use it. Absolutely. The good news is variable fonts are supported in almost all of the main browsers, except Firefox, where it is hidden behind the flag. The support is soon in the version 62. And it is also supported on iOS and on Android. And the best thing is that using variable font is not a thing about variable font or static font, but it is about, you can use variable fonts as an enhancement. So you can provide variable fonts for the supporting browsers now. And in the same time, you can provide those all static font files for those browsers which not support variable fonts that you used before. So that's why you can start using variable fonts now. And it's a really good thing. So we can use variable fonts. Let's go on how to use them. So we defined our font face. We have the font face definition, and we just include our font family in a class or HTML anywhere. And what access the variable fonts features, we have to use this font variation setting. What is it? So this font variation setting property, this is a so-called low-level property which makes possible to use variable fonts in the browsers now. This looks like this. We have this declaration, this property font variation setting. Then we have a tag, just like this, a 4-character tag, and the value. In this case, we just set a normal 400 weight for this font. But I mentioned we can use another weight, for example, 783. And the weight will change this way. Also, I have to tell you that there is a comment, this thing, this axis. All the features of the fonts, all the styles, called in typography to axis. So all the variation options called axis, that's why it's it. I will mention it again. It's axis. This is the weight axis of font. Also, we have a width axis with another 4-character tag and the value. The width is set in percentages, 100% is the normal version, so 50 is a condensed version. That's it. Normal and the condensed version. Next thing is optical sizing. We were talking about earlier this. This is optical sizing. This is optical sizing 10, and this is optical sizing 72. In the future, optical sizing will be on by default in every browser, but the outline of the font can be varied with this property just as well. Okay, the next one. This is an interesting thing. This is the italic settings. So, and you will see this setting option very rarely, I think, because normal font like that and an italic font usually are very, very different. Just look at this letter G here and here. It's maybe not possible to morph from this into this. That is the reason that the ital can have only two values, 0 or 1. So, if you find a font which provides this setting, you can set only 0 or 1, but most likely you will find a variable font with normal font and a separate font for the italic version. But we have a similar thing called slant. So font can have slant setting just like this. For example, so it's similar but not the same. The good thing that slanting in variable fonts are controlled. So it's not a distortion, but it's designed. It came from the designer of the font. It's also important to mention that the designer of a variable font don't have to include everything. So it's possible that you will find a variable font which has only a weight axis, or a weight and a width axis, but not all the others. And also, we were talking about, until this, the so-called registered axis, which means the possible settings are defined in the specifications. But a variable font can have any number of custom settings. And this can be anything else. For example, this is a custom setting, and please notice that we switched to all caps. So registered axes are marked with normal letters, and any custom settings are marked with capital letters. And this custom axis is just something like an X height. That's all. It's come from the design of this font. It's a custom. But it's just one simple example. But for example, we have the font Dickcover already, which have a lot of custom axes. And when I say a lot, I mean a lot. Just check this. This is one font only. One variable font with a lot of custom axes. Seems to be good, isn't it? That's it. The example is from the Microsoft demo site again. So, that is what we have now. But how to use variable fonts on the web when we have CSS4 fonts module implemented? Almost the same. But we will have, instead of the font variation setting low-level property, we will have high-level properties. So we will have font weight, we will have font stretch, and we will have font optical sizing, which will be auto, as I mentioned, and also the option using the font variation setting as well. We have the font style, we know italic, and it will have a new possible value, oblique, with the degree value as well. And everything else will be controlled just with low-level properties. All the custom properties will be controlled with the font variation setting low-level property. So that's how we will use it in the future. And also there will be a little change in the font face declaration. So because there can be a lot of file extensions. it's not the best option to define all these extensions as WOF2 variations, TrueType variation, and so on, and always change the browser to support them. So instead, we will use this. We will use the file extension and just this supports variations phrase, and that's all. So these are the changes we are ahead of. Okay, we were talking about variable fonts in general until now, but this is a Drupal event. So how could we support our Drupal content editors with variable fonts? The first thing is really easy. We should create themes which use variable fonts. Also, if we have themes with variable fonts, we may make predefined styles available in CK Editor to choose. So we don't say that they change anything, but for example, they can choose a style which is called highlighted. And this will use the features of a variable font or message or anything else. Or, even more, we can create paragraphs with custom font setting options, just like this. We can provide sliders, for example, to set the values. So they are in range, but they are controlled. I just saw a demonstration from Jason Pimentel about this. So you can look for his presentation on YouTube, and so it was done already. So that's all. And as I mentioned, Jason Pimentel, he said that words have power and typography is their voice. And that's it. I really suggest you to start to play with variable fonts, or even more, to start to create real sites using variable fonts, because it's fun, and it can be led to a much more rich web experience. There are some credits. I like to say thanks to those people who helped my preparation to this presentation with their work, with their blog posts or with their tools. And I'm happy to answer your questions. Thank you very much. Any question? That's okay?
Do you know anything about the browser, CPU, how the browser is
Yeah. I do not know numbers. I do know when I visited the Microsoft site, the Microsoft demo site I showed you, and arrived to that animation with the Decova font, then my laptop started to try to fly off. But maybe it's not the font, I think it was about the animation. I don't think it needs much more resources from the browsers. Maybe the animation, but if you not animate them, it's just like a static font. I think, but I'm not sure. I do not know numbers. Yep. It's just like anything in CSS. So I don't think it will have any performance gaps, if you mean that.
I'm a graphic designer.
Yeah.
I'm doing the designs in Sketch.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how I can use because
Yeah. I don't know if Sketch supports variable fonts already. But if they not, they will. I'm sure. Because there are a lot of other tools. I know, for example, all the Adobe tools supports variable fonts already. Adobe tools. For example, Adobe Illustrator supports it already. So I think if Sketch not supports it yet, it will support, I'm sure, because it's needed. You're welcome. Anything else? Okay. So, thanks for your attention.